Hello there. The High Court has rejected parts of the right to stay that has applied to EU citizens since Brexit. People with temporary residence permits are now better protected. And so a London court has thrown out parts of the rules that have applied to EU foreigners in Great Britain since Brexit. The High Court in the British capital ruled that the British Home Office had misinterpreted the legal situation arising from the 2020 Brexit agreement. Accordingly, EU citizens already legally living in Great Britain risk their stay if they do not apply for a second permanent residence permit. The rules mean that a very large number of people are faced with extremely serious uncertainty. According to the Brexit Treaty, citizens of EU countries who benefited from the free movement of people before Brexit and moved to Great Britain from the EU internal market are allowed to remain in the country. However, according to the current regulations, they have to prove their legal residence in a two-stage procedure. For those who had been in the country for less than 5 years at the time of leaving, they first had to apply for pre-settled status. After 5 years, a permanent right of residence can be acquired by applying for settled status. However, if this application is not made no later than 5 years after receiving the pre-settled status, EU citizens will lose their entitlements under the current British law. On the other hand, the London government's own supervisory authority for the rights of EU citizens, the Independent Monitoring Authority IMA, had sued. According to them, otherwise 2.6 million people could lose their rights and be deported just because they missed the application deadline. IMA General Counsel Rhys Davies welcomed the ruling. The withdrawal agreement provides that people can only lose their rights in very limited circumstances, and failure to move from pre-settled to settled status is not one of them. The British Home Office, on the other hand, said it was disappointed with the verdict and announced an appeal. British government representatives had repeatedly described the EU settlement scheme as a success. Critics, on the other hand, argue that its rules are incompatible with the UK-EU Brexit deal, as they would make almost 3 million people with temporary residence permits illegal immigrants if they did not submit a follow-up application. An independent authority set up by the British government, which has been tasked with checking compliance with the rights of EU citizens in the country since Brexit, had lodged a complaint against the rules. The EU Commission and the non-governmental organization The 3 Million, which campaigns for EU citizens in the UK, supported the lawsuit. The ruling will help protect the rights of temporary residents, said the 3 Million's Monique Hawkins. These people were at risk of losing their jobs, their homes, their freedom to travel, or their access to healthcare. People should not lose their rights just because they forgot to apply for a second residence permit. British Deputy Home Secretary Simon Murray said after the ruling that the EU settlement scheme goes well beyond the commitments Britain had made under the Brexit deal. Well, he obviously hasn't read it. The rules protect the rights of EU citizens and offer them the route to permanent residency in the UK, he says. The government in London is disappointed with this verdict and, as I said, will appeal against it. Yeah, Brexit has quite a few implications, but there is still the fish. UK ministers have announced that the latest fisheries quota deal with the EU will allow UK fishermen to catch 30,000 tonnes more fish in 2023 than would have been possible before Brexit. Under the latest annual deal unveiled by ministers on Tuesday, British boats will be allowed to catch 140,000 tonnes of fish worth £280 million over the next year. That's a 27% increase on the 110 tonnes allowed to the United Kingdom if they would have been allocated as an EU member, according to the ministers. We are 30,000 tonnes better off now that we are outside the EU than we would have been had we remained a member, is what Fisheries Minister Mark Spencer told MPs in the UK House of Commons on Tuesday. This deal is better than we would have negotiated had we stayed in the EU, Spencer added. Yeah, gain a few millions and lose billions. For its part, the European Commission emphasized that the agreement has secured fishing opportunities for the EU fleet of over 350,000 tons, worth around €1 billion. The agreement applies to all jointly managed fisheries resources in EU and UK waters. Although the UK fisheries sector contributes only around 0.1% to gross domestic product to the GDP, the state of the UK fisheries industry was one of the main arguments used by Brexiteers in the years leading up to and during the 2016 referendum campaign. The UK has also agreed annual catch quotas for the North Sea and Arctic waters with Norway. As part of the trade and cooperation agreement with the EU, which came into effect in 2021, the UK has regained some of its available stocks. Under the deal, 25% of the current EU quota in UK waters will be transferred to the UK by June 2026. After 2026, future EU-UK negotiations on access and stock sharing will take place on an annual basis. Despite the prospect of a modest recovery for the fishing industry, a Centre for European Reform study published on Tuesday estimates that Brexit has cost the UK economy £40 billion in the year to July 2022. There can be no doubt that the UK economy is significantly smaller as a result of Brexit, said John Springford, who leads the CER's research project, which compares the UK economy to a double as if the UK had stayed in the EU. In March 2022, when he was Chancellor, Rishi Sunak tacitly accepted the OBR's projection that the economy would be around 4% smaller and then increased taxes by £46 billion to ensure funding for public services, said Springford. According to my analysis, almost all of these tax increases would not have been necessary if the UK had stayed in the EU. So once again, a few million more income for a 0.1% of GDP economy is costing this country billions. And don't come up with the sovereignty nonsense again. But we see it every day. Brexit is a gift that keeps on giving. And to once again quote my most loved Dutch border guard, welcome to the Brexit, sir.